which I didn't have. I didn't keep it, but some years ago, a fellow contacted me. His father was in my division as a replacement, and he sent me. He emailed me the program, which I still have on my computer. And the list, the program was a menu, of course, what we ate, Christmas dinner, and a list of all the attendees. Of course, my name, my brother's name, his father's name was all listed. We were all in attendance there. And so things like that I have. And I think I told you about some of the what they call details that we used to do, taking the SS prisoners out, chopping trees down in nearby mountainsides and so forth. So I'm not going to repeat that. My trip to Italy, ride shotgun on a train filled with grain. I think I told you about all that.
I think I heard that with I was starting to listen to that with the Atlanta History Center, that when you went to Italy, you guys had to travel on a train, and you had to travel that way to get there.
Well, it was on an army truck. No, they took us in an army, myself and two other soldiers. They took us in an army truck from Salzburg, near Salzburg, to Genoa, Italy. Put us in a hotel.
And that was after the monastery?
Well, no, the rest of the unit was still living in the old monastery.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we lived in that monastery unless we were on detail somewhere. But that was where our living quarters were until March, late March of 1946, when it was our turn to return home. And from there, we rode on army trucks to Germany, Bremerhaven, Germany, where they transferred us to the 81st Division, because the 81st remnants of the 81st Division was going home at the time. So they just transferred us from the 42nd Division technically to the 81st Division just to get home.
Before we go to that, your detail in Genoa, Italy, what did you have to do there before you went home?
That was well before we went home. Mm-hmm. That Genoa, Italy was not too long after the war ended. That was one of the early details. In fact, that was the next detail that I went on after taking these SS prisoners up in the mountainsides to chop down the trees, cut it up into firewood, haul it back into Salzburg to give to the bakers first so they could bake bread or operate their ovens, and then they give some of the firewood to civilians as well. And of course, the army needed firewood too. But anyhow, so we went, and when we got there in Genoa, I remember the three of us walking down the street, and one of them was from an Italian family, and he spoke Italian. But civilians would come up to me and think I was Italian for some reason. They would start talking to me. I'd point to him, talk to him, not me. But anyhow, in the afternoon when we got there, the hotel was near the docks, and we saw a coal ship, and so we went aboard because we were told it was an American ship filled with coal, and so we went aboard to be able to talk to some Americans because otherwise we talked to Italians. I couldn't. But anyhow, so they invited us to stay for dinner, which was a good deal. So we stayed for dinner on that coal ship. And then early the next morning, this grain ship arrived. And that was what we were there for.
Mm.
So they transferred the grain from the ship into these hopper cars. They filled each hopper car with the grain. In the middle of the train, they had a regular boxcar with 3 folding cots in it. Somewhere I got a picture of the inside of the boxcar showing the folding cots. That's what we slept on. And so we rode on the train, took off through the Po Valley. And I don't know if I told you how we saw all these tomato plants as far as the eye could see. When the train stopped to take on more water and coal. So we jumped out and we grabbed a bunch of tomatoes that looked very ripe to us and got back in the boxcar and cut up the tomatoes, had sliced tomatoes. Because in the K rations, C rations, you had, cans of Spam and other items. And you had little packages of cheese, crackers. So we had sliced tomatoes on cheese and crackers, which made it taste better.
Mm-hmm.
Through the Brenner Pass and then into Salisbury. And of course, the grain, the first loads of grain went to the bakers to bake bread, and then make bread for customers, civilian customers, and of course for the U.S. military as well. But so that was that particular journey.
Did you guys leave with a lot of bread?
We didn't leave with bread.
No.
Because once we got back to Salzburg, we're through with the train. We had to rejoin our unit back in the monastery.
Mm-hmm.
And
now, when you were getting back to when it was time for you guys to leave, could you tell us about that time?
well, when it was our turn to leave, as I say, they, I don't really remember whether it was Army trucks or boxcars on the train. But I know we transported from Salzburg to Bremerhaven, Germany, the port, and let's say we were joined in the 81st Division guys, got on the ship. It was a Liberty ship called the SS Madagascar. We called it the Madagascar. And I have a picture taken of me sitting on outside the deck next to one of our cooks was sitting next to me, and between the two of them both we were reading something. And another picture of my brother who was standing on a deck on a different part of the ship. And where it took us 15 days to go over, it took us, I don't know, 6, 7 days coming back. Of course, everybody was on deck to holler and shout, cheer when we saw the Statue of Liberty. So we disembarked in New York, put us on a train back to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where we were discharged. And then they gave us train tickets from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, back to Jacksonville, and where our mother met us at the train station, took us home. And when we got home, we took off our Army uniforms from head to toe and got back with civilian clothes. And we donated our Army uniforms to a different army, the Salvation Army. And that put our military career behind us because we wanted to get back to college, finish, get our degrees, which we did.
Mhm. What did you guys do for a living after that?
Well, we immediately went as fast as we could. We went back to the University of Florida, finish our degrees. And between the summer, between our junior and senior year, because our dream was to get a degree and then go to Wharton School of Finance, get a master's degree, leading because we both wanted to be CPAs. And that was our dream. That's why in high school we took shorthand class, typing class, because that's the direction we wanted to go in.
Mhm.
It's the fact that in both classes, we were the only two males in both classes. The rest were all females,
Right?
which was very nice.
I bet you like that.
Because of that, and twins were sort of unique. We were elected the twin mascots of the Senior Girls Club. Be interesting. But anyhow, so we went back to the University of Florida, and we had an older brother. He was 3 years older. When the war broke out, he tried to join the Army. He was rejected, and then he tried to join the Navy. And Jacksonville was a big Navy town. Also rejected. He was classified 4F because as a young teenager, he had a surgery on both ears. They called it double mastoid surgery. Because of that, his hearing was affected.
Mm.
His hearing was only about 50%. So that's why they classified him 4F. And it so happened before the war, during the war, we had 6 uncles in Virginia, headquartered in Richmond, Virginia, that started a house-to-house business, selling housewares house to house on credit, $1 down, $1 when you could find them home. So during the war, things like, the Kewaskum Regal Aluminum Company, Kewaskum, Wisconsin, they switched from making aluminum pots and pans to making artillery shell casings. Rogers Silverware Factory, instead of making silverware, they made mess kits, things like that, for the Army, Navy. So during the war, our uncles continued operating. After the war, those items, the factories switched back to making them, like things like blankets. They made Army blankets during the war. After the war, they switched back to make civilian blankets again. Same way with the aluminum factory, started making pots and pans, silverware factory, so forth. So after the war, everything was on a ration basis.
Mm.
Like gasoline was rationed, certain foods were rationed. You had to have ration tickets to be able to buy that stuff. I still have some ration tickets. So anyhow, um, they gave us, so they probably had the best ration since they operated during the war. So they gave us, to help us get started, they gave us 25 sets a week of aluminum pots and pans, 25 sets a week of silverware, a number of blankets out of their allotments, and that helped us get started doing the same thing. So that summer, we started that business. I was a door-to-door salesman all that summer. And we only went into white neighborhoods. We decided at the time, since it was segregation, we didn't want our bill collectors to come weekly and go into the black neighborhoods. But a white person in a black neighborhood, segregation wasn't particularly welcome at that time, and vice versa. So we only opened accounts strictly in white residential areas. And then on weekends, during our senior year, on weekends, we used to come back to Jacksonville, which was only 90 miles from college, and open more accounts. So by the time we graduated, we said, we don't need to go to Wharton School of Finance. Forget all that. We got a business going. So that's how we started in the house-to-house business. And it was good for, that was in 48, 49. And after about 4 years, early 50s, we realized that with the advent of opening neighborhood shopping centers, stores selling the same products we were selling for a few dollars less.
Mm.
I didn't think the future of the business was going to be lasting to support 3 families.
Right.
So with that in mind, we opened a jewelry store for my twin brother to operate in Jacksonville area called Arlington. So because in the house-to-house business, before opening that jewelry store, we were contacted in Jacksonville by a Jewish agency. They said they had a survivor, Holocaust survivor from one of the German concentration camps. He was originally from Poland. He was a master watchmaker. He could not only fix watches, he could make parts if necessary. But he didn't speak English. He spoke European languages. They couldn't get him a job at any jewelry store. So they wanted to know if possibly we would give him a job. So my older brother and I said, we don't sell watches on credit, but in order to give him a job, because our father was available, he was born from Lithuania, and he could speak Yiddish and he could speak several European languages, so he could be the interpreter. So I ended up flying to New York, contacting the Benrus Watch Company in advance, ended up flying to New York to become a Benrus watch dealer. So we started out selling Benrus watches on credit, $1 down, $1 when we could find them home, knowing that if the watches stopped working before they finished paying for it, they wouldn't finish paying for the watch. It got fixed. And he ended up with a workbench for him with all his tools and everything. And I say my father was the interpreter, and he not only could fix watches, clocks as well. And we started contacting all the local jewelry stores, telling them we have a master watch and clock person that could fix them, make parts if needed. So we started getting business from jewelry stores. They would bring us watches, he would fix them, and then they would send somebody back to pick them up. So whatever we could charge for his services. So we built a nice little business really for him on the side, so to speak. So that's the way it worked. But we didn't want to talk to him about his experience as slave labor for maybe over a year. I don't remember how it came up, but he told us that the only reason they let him live was because he was a master watchmaker. They needed him to fix especially watches of SS officers and pilots. He says it was not unusual, especially for pilots, German pilots. When they came back to pick up their watch, they would put their Lugers to his head, their Luger pistols,
Wow.
to his temple, and say, if this watch loses even 30 seconds, they're going to come back and pull the trigger. So he says that was the kind of pressure that he lived under, but that's the only reason they let him live. They needed him.
Wow.
He married after the war ended, in a displaced persons camp. He met a woman who was also a survivor, and they got married. And there again, they let her live because she worked in a kitchen, one of the concentration camps. There again, they needed her as slave labor to work in the kitchen. That's how it worked. In Jacksonville, they had a daughter, only child, a daughter. And she ended up brilliant student, straight A student, brilliant. Married a guy from Atlanta. Still lives in Atlanta, her husband, and she has 3 children. Very nice lady. But anyhow, so that was that story.
Now, after you worked with the watches and you did that, didn't you guys later go on to sell furniture, or what did you do next after you sold watches?
When the neighborhood shopping center started, at that time, all the furniture stores in Jacksonville and most other cities, if not all of them, were located in downtown areas. They were not opening furniture stores in the neighborhood shopping centers. So we said, oh, well, that's the direction for us to go into. So we took on some small furniture items to sell on credit. You know, things like cocktail tables, end tables, things that we could fit into automobiles, and inside the cars or inside the trunks, whatever small furniture items we could fit inside. And some of our collectors had pickup trucks, so they would carry some larger furniture items as we acquired them in their pickup trucks, because when they would collect, especially the customers that paid very well, they would try and add on additional furniture items to their accounts. So that's how we started in the furniture business, and it so happened there were 2 brothers. One was 18 at the time, 17 or 18. The other one was a year younger. They both came to work for us in Jacksonville in the house-to-house business. So one of them, they both went into the Navy. When they got out of the Navy, one of them had been based in the Navy in Jacksonville. He had met a Jacksonville girl that turned out to be a friend of my wife,
Oh, wow.
the girl that I married.
That's
So he ended up coming back to Jacksonville and marrying this girl that he had met, Jewish girl. So the two brothers, the older one was Mike Belford, the younger, his younger brother was Bill Belford. Bill had gone back to, he ended up in Columbus, Ohio, working in a furniture store. So anyhow, the older brother, Mike, was working as a bookkeeper, but his father-in-law had a luggage factory. His father-in-law told him that he understood that myself and my two brothers were doing very well in the house-to-house business because we were expanding. We had opened branch offices, different cities in Florida, southern Georgia, like Savannah, Brunswick, Waycross, cities in Florida. So he told Mike Belford to see if he could get a job with us and learn the business. And if he could and learn the business, he would finance him to start the same business. That was the back. Well, we didn't know any of that. So Mike applied and we hired him because we knew him from previous experience. So it didn't take long. We opened a branch office for Mike to be the manager of the branch office, and which he was excellent. And then we made him the supervisor of all of our branch offices. So as things developed, he came to us and he said, look, I'll be honest with you. He told us what happened with his father-in-law. So he said, so you're three brothers. He says, I can't advance more than where I'm a supervisor of all the stores. So he says, do a lot of traveling. So he says, I'm going to give you notice. I'm going to leave and I am going to start the business, but I'm only going to open accounts in the black neighborhoods. So that way you don't have to be concerned that I'm in competition with you. And so we helped him. My older brother helped him. He helped him contact the same sources that we were getting products from and told them to trust Mike, he'll pay the bills. Helped him get started. And he and I especially became very close friends. Well, it so happened his brother in Columbus, Ohio, got upset without giving all the details. He became the sales manager of that furniture store. And the owner had a sister. They inherited the furniture store from their father. The sister was an absentee owner. She insisted her son would be hired as a salesman. So Bill Belford got to the point where the son was losing customers. He couldn't close sales. He was a terrible salesman. So he told the owner, you got to fire him or I'm out of here. The owner says, I'm sorry, it's my sister's son. I can't fire him. So Bill talked to another salesman, said, you got any money? He said, well, I got savings of a couple of $1,000. He said, well, I got 3,000. How about let's leave? We'll start our own furniture store. Together, we got $5,000 to buy the initial inventory. And the rest was history.
So you started the store with $5,000?
They did in Columbus, Ohio. They were successful. So that's Mike decided to give the house-to-house business. He had taken on a partner because he needed additional money to expand. Because, on credit, you open accounts, but you got to pay for the merchandise that they bought. Now you got to wait for collections to come in. You have to build until you get enough accounts, thousands of accounts, where it becomes a cash business because your income from all these accounts are supplying the money to open new accounts. So it really becomes that when you reach a certain level, it becomes a cash business based on money coming in. But anyhow, so Mike left. He went up to Columbus, Ohio, got with his brother. They opened a store in Cincinnati. And just as they had opened that store in Cincinnati, a couple of months, I stayed in contact with Mike. We didn't have computers in those days. We didn't have emails, but we had telephones. So we stayed in touch. Told him we had already switched to selling furniture. So they had opened 2 stores. One was brand new. So in January, we met. They wanted to go to spend a week or so in Miami Beach on vacation with their family, wife, couple of kids, whatever. So we made up, my older brother and I, to drive down and meet them at the hotel in Miami Beach, spend a few days there with them. And we came to an agreement that we would open a store in Jacksonville, a regular furniture store, which would be ours. The Columbus and Cincinnati stores would be theirs. We would open a store in Indianapolis, Indiana as partners, and then expand from there. And that's what we did. All a handshake, gentleman's agreement, operate basically under the same name, combine our buying power, same ads, create the same ads, and so forth. So that's how we really got into the furniture business.
And what was the name of your stores?
Well, it started out in Columbus and Cincinnati was already Giant Furniture Warehouse. So in Jacksonville, we opened, since our house-to-house business was national furnishings, home furnishings, we opened as National Furniture Store, which we changed to Nationwide later. As we opened more stores, we opened Atlanta's Giant Furniture Warehouse together in partnership. And we were so successful, we brought in a manager from Columbus, Ohio, to be the manager of the store, but the business was so fantastic, he couldn't handle it. We sent him back to Ohio, brought another manager from Ohio down to Atlanta. He couldn't handle it. So that's when we decided, because we had wall-to-wall customers 7 days a week. We were amazed.
Wow.
We were discounters. So anyhow, that's when we decided. My brother Howard agreed to move to Atlanta, take over the store to manage it, because his wife already had a sister and her husband and a niece and a nephew already, and their families already living in Atlanta. So it was easy for his wife to agree to move to Atlanta.
Right.
That's why he moved to Atlanta, took over the store. And
When did you move here?
well, it was some years later. I moved to Atlanta in 1984. Years earlier, I used to spend a lot of time in Atlanta, 2 weeks at a time. At that time, both my brothers were living in Atlanta. my twin brother in a home, my older brother, him and his wife in an apartment. So one trip I would live 2 weeks with my twin brother in his house, and the next trip I would live 2 weeks with my older brother and his wife in the apartment. So that was, and I really thought that I'd really need to move my wife and my mother-in-law, who was living with us at the time, to Atlanta, but I didn't want to suggest that to my wife, especially because all of our friends, we had a lot of cousins in Jacksonville, and especially my mother-in-law, all her friends, of course, were in Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want to take my mother-in-law away from her friends at the time. But finally, one trip I came home from Atlanta, and my wife said, "You got to make up your mind. We're either going to live in Jacksonville or we're going to move to Atlanta." Of course, that gave me the opening. I said, "Well, we really need to move to Atlanta."
Yeah. Well, that's good that that happened, you know?
So that's what we did. My wife went apartment hunting in Atlanta and wasn't sure where I wanted to live, what area. We did have stores in Atlanta, but she decided she had to find an apartment that had rooms large enough because we wanted to take our master bedroom suite and our dining room suite to Atlanta. We didn't want to part with them. So she had to find an apartment that had a bedroom large enough to accommodate our master bedroom suite and our dining room suite. So she finally found it here in Dunwoody. And that's how we ended up. For 3 years, we lived in that apartment. And we used to, right across the street was Village Drive on North Shallowford Road, right at the intersection, North Shallowford, Chambly, Dunwoody, and Peoria. Apartment complex is still there. So for the first 3 years, we used to walk for exercise down Village Drive. But you could only walk as far as the creek. Couldn't go over the creek. So anyhow, after, I guess, 2.5 years, suddenly there was a bridge across the creek and they started building houses. Village Drive across the bridge was a dirt road. So now we're walking across the bridge, watching them build houses. We went into every house that they started. 2 of the houses were built before the bridge. One of them is a show house to show people, interested people, the blueprints of different kind of houses they were building. So we kept walking and we were going to every house they were building until the 10th house was being built, plus a few others. Then we said, okay, this is a house that we like. The layout, the rooms, more so than the others, because this was a 2-story house. So the others between us and the bridge were all 1-stories. So past that, they were building some 2-story houses, 1-stories. So anyhow, I contacted the building foreman who was in charge of the construction, told him we might be interested in that particular house. He said, well, can you wait till next week? And I said, what's going to happen next week? He said, well, the real estate company's contract ends the end of this week. So next week, I can introduce you to the father-son developers. They're both engineers, and they're the developers of the 60 houses we're going to build. So you can deal direct with them. And I said, that's a smart idea. So the next week we met with the two father-son developers, went inside the house, and they had just completed the walls on the first floor, putting all the sheetrock on the first floor. So I said, would you mind measuring the master bedroom and the dining room? So he did. And I said, the dining room will work fine. But the master bedroom, I need, the width has to be another 2.5 feet to accommodate our bedroom suite. He said, we'll take care of that, no problem. And then we talked price, and we agreed to the price and had a closing on the house while they were still working on completing it. And I was curious how they were going to do that. So they told me what morning to be there. And when I got there, they had a dozen workers. They pulled off enough from the other houses, and all of them had pieces of long 2x4s. They put half of them inside the room. The other half they put outside. They had already poured additional concrete foundation. The father said, we're going to give you 3 feet instead of 2.5 feet. We poured the concrete for an additional 3 feet. So then one of the workers came with a skill saw. He sawed the outline of the whole wall, the outside wall. And with those 2x4s, they moved the wall the 3 feet. And they stood there until they built a small roof over that 3-foot addition.
Wow. So you were watching them build?
And watching that operation, how they added 3 feet to that room.
Wow.
Such a
You
small,
you were there when they were doing it.
yeah, because I was curious, how in the world were they going to give us that extra footage? So,
You know, a side note from this, right now, last weekend on 60 Minutes, they were showing a house. They're showing how to make a 3D printed house.
yeah,
With a 3D machine. It has the concrete coming out of the little nozzle, and it just measures it and goes along and just lays the concrete.
yeah,
And that is just amazing. And the first house they did was to give to a homeless person. And I thought that was amazing that they're to this point now to be able to do it like that.
yeah. Well, I guess initially it may not be price effective until they, improve it and learn how to do it more of a production basis.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
that definitely is part of the future.
Yeah.
But here in Atlanta, a couple of years ago, they poured the concrete foundations, and then they took shipping containers
Mm-hmm.
and made small houses out of them.
Yeah. I, I love that. And, we have there's a new film facility that they did that, where some of the areas are the containers, and then they'll have an eatery place it's almost like with some of these film groups in Atlanta, it's almost like a small village. So that you have your little place to go eat. You have the bigger buildings, but then you have some of the smaller ones. So they were using some of those cargo cars for that.
Right.
That's amazing. Now, from the time that what we could do is we could wrap up for now if you want to.
And
And
look, 12:45, my wife will be call me for lunch anytime.
Yeah,
So,
I was looking at the time for you. But your interview is definitely set up different than my other ones. And so when we go to do the final one, I'm going to look back through all my material and the interview that I had with you, because for this one, you gave me a lot of information about your time after Dachau and during that time, but then you being able to interview the prisoners and some of these other people's stories, a part of it. This is a big part of the interview. And then your work afterwards. I always ask about people afterwards, what they did. So I'm going to go back through, and the questions I have will be questions about things that we didn't talk about or elaborate on what we did, plus the your time in Normandy that you just had and the Holocaust Museum, a little bit about that as well. And I so have enjoyed everything that you've talked about and hearing from the other interviews that you've shared. I just love hearing your story.
well, thank you.
Thank you so much, and you have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.